Hi, welcome. This is Raphael of Cypress Doula and Healing Services. I decided to make a video answering some of your questions, those who are in the summer cohort. There are now two because so many of you expressed interest, and I wanted to say thank you again for allowing me to support you as your mentor. And always feel free to ask questions, send me questions. I always want to make sure that I make these answers available to everyone. And I plan on making videos in the future just to make it a little bit easier on everyone. So I got a few questions from one of you, and I actually think that they are great questions for everybody. So one of them is we in our first session together, summer cohort 1, we talked about a lot of things, including crystals. And one of the questions was, how do you charge crystals? So there's a few different ways that you can charge crystals. The most common and easiest is to take, orange citrine. Citrine, Citrine. And you take that stone, put it in water, and you put the other stones in that citrine water and let it sit overnight. Couple things to keep in mind if you do that route is there are some water-soluble crystals like selenite. It will dissolve if you put it in water. So just be sure that you're not putting any water-soluble crystals into water. And also, I typically like to use sea salt inside of my water because that's also a really great agent to cleanse and to recharge your crystals. Some do it with the full moon or the new moon. I prefer the full moon. The new moon is about new beginnings, so some people use that, so it's more of a refreshing. I like to use the full moon because I want that full charge and the power of the moon. But you use one of the moons, new moon or full moon, and you put out a bowl of water, glass of water, put your crystals into that and let it sit overnight with the moon. So, and then the other is to take a piece of selenite, Selenite, and place the crystals near the selenite. Again, no water with this one, but either you're going to place them on top of the selenite, or you'll have the selenite in the middle and you put it around, or you can put it inside of a container together. Selenite cleanses and recharges crystals. So those are the ways you can do that. And I've been talking to everyone about making an altar and the importance of an altar. And there's all different kinds of altars that can exist. The one that I am encouraging you all to put together is an ancestor altar. And an ancestor altar is something that is used across cultures, but including in the African American community, that is just a place to honor those who came before you. So one of the things that I can do, if you all are interested, is I can show you some pictures of different altars and what I mean, because I'm also a visual person, so I get it. And what I'll explain here is your basic ancestor altar is some sort of stand, where, or a flat surface where your ancestors can be. So that could be a table, it could be an egg crate, it can be the floor, it could be a bookshelf, it can be, the mantle on top of your fireplace. You just need a flat surface, and you want to place there pictures of your ancestors. Don't want to mix the living and the dead. So these are just people who have gone before you, who you want to honor, who you want to uplift, who you want to send light to, who you want to have support you in catching up light, and who you want to have praying for you. And then you want to put a glass of water, because water is a conductor of energy, and in whatever container feels good to you. I prefer like a glass, like a wine glass, something like that. um, some sort of candle. White is preferred because that's, you know, that's pure. And you can also put things that you know your ancestors like. So I've had an ancestor altar for a long time, so I've had all kinds of different things. But one of the iterations of my ancestor altar, I had snuff. And if y'all ain't got people from the deep south, snuff is basically powdered tobacco, and I have a lot of ancestors that dip snuff. So I went and bought the one that I remember my grandma using, and I put that on the altar for a good long while. I've put cigars, different types of alcohols, things like that. Now, if you have additional questions about like, what do you do if you have ancestors that you don't want to have anything to do with? Or what if you don't have any pictures? Or what if you don't know who your ancestors are? That can be another session that we can talk about, but I just wanted to answer that question of what kind of altar am I talking about? And it's just really a space to give light and to uplift all those who came before us. And because without their stories, we don't exist, and their stories can often help us in what we're trying to get to. So that is what that is. What is exactly meant when someone says trauma? So trauma right now is a buzzword. Let's just be honest. It's a word that those who are in behavioral health have been using for decades, and it's finally become popularized for various reasons. And trauma really means that a pain has taken place. Like I almost want to do like, let's get the dictionary version. A deeply distressing or disturbing experience. Okay. So trauma by itself, we're just describing something that is deeply painful that is going to be remembered in your body or in your psyche. So you can have bodily trauma. So that's your physical body. You can have mental trauma. You can have emotional trauma. You can have reproductive trauma. Any part of the human existence, it can have trauma associated with it. So when someone says that there was a trauma of some sort, they're like, this is a deeply distressing experience that I'm having around my back, because I have back trauma, right? It can be like that. For our purposes, when I'm talking about trauma, I'm typically referring to emotional trauma and the things that are connected to it physically, spiritually, mentally. But I'm coming from a behavioral background. My original trade was sociology. So I'm typically meaning emotional trauma. So I hope that answers that question. And then I mentioned the Egyptian Book of the Dead at some point, and there was a question of like, what is this book? And the Egyptian Book of the Dead is a ancient text that was written during the ancient Egyptian civilization that detailed the rituals, prayers, and behaviors that were done to prepare a body and therefore a soul for the afterlife. So ancient Egyptians believed that particularly their royalty went to the spirit world and had a whole lifetime in the spirit world. So much like a Catholic might view purgatory, but it's not like a negative thing because purgatory is a rough place to be. But more of an existence where spirits can exist. And they believed that in order to make a smooth transition into that afterlife and to also have a positive experience in the spirit world, you needed to prepare the body in a particular way. So there were particular ways that the body was washed. There were incense that were used, different perfumes and herbs that were put in ears and nose and mouth. And that's where you get the wrapping of the mummy, because there's all these things that have been done to the body, and that helps to preserve the body, especially for those who were royalty. And I encourage that book because it's good to hear where we've come from and understand, not just as Black people, but also, well, in addition to understanding our history and how we did work spiritually long time ago. I want to make sure that we have a place of reference, because Africans of the diaspora, people of the world, practice all kinds of religions, and all of those um, holidays, rituals, sacraments come from somewhere, even if it was, borrowed from another tradition. And so it's a great reference book to have if you're really wanting to understand how human beings create and sustain ritual. There's also the Tibetan Book of the Dead, which is much more of a philosophical, mythical kind of book. The Egyptian Book of the Dead is more just like, this is how we did things and this is why. And the Tibetan book is the same, with a little bit of like, and here's the enlightenment that we as the living can get. So if that's something that you're interested in, I'm a geek. So I love that kind of reading. And I'll even admit, with the Egyptian Book of the Dead, my God, I've had to flip through because it's dense, and you can tell that it's been translated more than once. So it's a rough read. So if that's something that you're interested in, go ahead and get it. It's not required. It's just one of the ones that I like to recommend, just as a great foundation builder. So, all right. So I think I answered all of the questions. Again, if you have any more, please send them my way. I want to hear from you. Whether it's about the session, questions that you have coming up about the sessions that we have together, or just being out in the world. I love answering questions. So talk to you all soon, and take care.